Okay, so welcome to another video here at Back to Classics, and today we're going to discuss this 1965 250 Mach 1. Complete nut and bolt restoration, but before we dive into the specifics of this bike that we have here, as always, let's first pay our attention to the historical background of the Mach 1 and how it all came about. Now, we made a video about the Marianna racing bikes of the early 1950s. Very successful in racing, and of course that saw its way to street models in the form of the very first Ducati singles that were introduced in the late 1950s, especially the what we now call the narrow case range of single-cylinder models. In all kinds of different types that were introduced, all kinds of different displacements ranging from 100cc up to 250 by the early 1960s. So by the early 1960s Ducati had the 250 available, and that was translated to a racing bike in the early 1960s by a Spanish company called Mototrans. And Mototrans was a sort of a company set up to build Ducatis for the local Spanish market, which was unique in the world because everywhere else in the world Ducati supplied motorcycles themselves, but in Spain at that time it was thought to create a sort of a factory where Ducati motorcycles were made under the Ducati name, but by a different company, sort of licensing Ducati technology to a Spanish company. That Spanish company also went racing, and that was first done in the 24-hour races at Montjuic. Of course, I will again pronounce it the wrong way, but it is a Catalan mountain close to Barcelona where 24-hour races were held. So in 1962, the Ducati and Mototrans entered into the 24-hour race on the Catalan mountain of Montjuic close to Barcelona, with drivers Vargas and Ripa, joint Spanish-Italian team, and they won that event in that same year, 1962, the 24 Horas in Montjuic. As is often the case with Ducati, many models, as we saw later on as well with the 750 Supersport, getting back at the 1972 Imola victory, the Mike Hillwood replica, getting back to the 1978 Mike Hillwood victory on the Isle of Man. Again here we see a street model sort of commemorating that racing victory Ducati had in 1962. And that became the Mach 1 that was introduced in 1964. Largely based on the existing 250 GT, but with a very much tuned engine, with a different camshaft, larger carburetor, and a lot of special parts that were unique to the Mach 1 as it was introduced in 1964. So the Mach 1 also became the first Ducati ever to win the Isle of Man TT in 1969 in the hands of Alistair Rogers, who drove the 250 Mach 1 to victory in the 1969 250 class at the TT Isle of Man. So it was also in that sense a successful bike for Ducati, and one that became very sought after this very day. And why is that? Well, first of all, because it is a highly tuned, very special 250. In fact, one can argue it was one of the fastest 250cc bikes that were available in 1964 to 1966, but also it is well, it's an absolute beauty of a thing. One could argue one of the most beautiful, at least of the narrow case singles that were made. So it really is a highly sought after bike. It was also quite expensive at the time, and that made it that it wasn't sold in very large numbers, which we see today because original Mach 1s are very rare. So that is what we have here. So now let's dive into a little bit more about this specific bike. And by the way, if you like this t-shirt that I'm wearing, You can check them out in our online store, because these will be available shortly. Specially made, drawn, a 750 Super Sport green frame on a printed, highly quality t-shirt, now available in our online store. So be sure, if you want to support this channel, to check them out and get one of these for yourself. Okay, so this specific Mach 1, it was brought to us for a complete restoration. It was largely original, the way it was presented to us, although it was clear that it had been restored several times over the years, and it had been, well, worked to, kept going, but not in a very, very good way, as we saw on many details when we took it apart. So let's first focus on the rolling chassis. A lot of issues there. Issues included some brackets with threaded lugs and sort of worn out, and other things minor. But the biggest issue we found was with the headstock. On a side note, we often see that these narrow case frames are bent and are crooked in some sort of way. They're not the, if you compare it with the later frames, which are much more rigid, yeah, these frames tend to bend and get out of shape quite easily if they're in a crash. So we saw as well with this frame, we saw damage to the steering head, where the bearings are pressed in. We saw a huge gap, so that indicated to us that these bearings had been replaced. Also, we couldn't get a good fitment on these bearings. So, well, a lot of thought went into that, but in the end we needed to completely replace this tube to get it absolutely as it should be, which meant that we had to make a jig holding all the tubes in place while we welded in a new tube that we made to get this frame as it should be again. So that all turned out beautifully. New tube here, a lot of new brackets and threads now reworked and up and running again. So that's good to go, as well as some other minor repairs. The bodywork, the fuel tank side covers were all in good shape, except for the rear mudguard that had been repaired, well, a huge number of times. There were plates in there, there were all kinds of welds done by previous owners, up to the point that, well, it was going to be very hard. Luckily, we have some very good replacement parts for these mudguards. So in the end, we chose to fit a new rear mudguard to get that going again. So as you can see, all freshly painted again and good to go for this final build. Moving on to the engine, again here we saw a lot of issues with it, gearbox problems, other things. Well, again, we took it apart, inspected all that was to be seen in there, and made a plan to improve on the engine, which has now been completely rebuilt and done, as you can see here. Cases have been wet blasted, the crankshaft has been pulled apart, and in the end we chose to fit a new conrod, a new bearing pin to put it all together again and align again with a lot of new gearbox parts to complete that, as well as the starter mechanism. That is often also a problem on these narrow case bikes, as you saw probably in our video on the 200 Elite that we're also restoring. So that is all been done. Cylinder head, again, all worked up, new valve guides, new valve seats. The original carburetor, the SS1 carburetor, has been completely refurbished and is now also good to go. So, engine now done, frame largely done as well, and well, as you can see, freshly painted. So it's now time to start with the final process of assembling this complete bike into a bike that we can actually take out on the road. So meanwhile, a lot has happened on the Mach 1. We're making good progress here. As you can see, the restored engine has been fitted to the frame. So that's all set up and ready to go, except for the ignition that needs to be adjusted. But we're waiting until we have fitted the whole of the wiring loom So we can have a battery fitted to adjust the ignition system. Ignition on this instance will be original points ignition with the original Ducati Elettronica ignition coil underneath the fuel tank. And that is what we're aiming for in this instance, is a 100% originality for the complete of the bike. So no upgrades, just as it left the factory back in 1965. As you can see, we also have restored and fitted the whole of the suspension units. So the front fork has been completely overhauled and put together. So that's done, as well as the rear shocks, original rear shocks, obviously, that have been refurbished as well. So we fitted new shafts in there, new seals, everything turned out to be functioning very well. Next job will be the wheels. Now, this bike came with a set of non-original steel chromed wheel rims. Non-original in the sense that they were delivered originally with Radaelli wheel rims, Radaelli made wheel rims, chrome steel. But these were not with the bike anymore. They were just replaced by a cheaper set of aftermarket rims. And we're actually looking still for this project for a set of original Radaelli wheel rims, so we can put together a set of rims. Now, the Mach 1 in many markets was also available with a set of aluminium Borani wheels as an optional extra. And the bike came with at least one of those. So the front wheel, meanwhile, has been restored already. So here you can see the Borani inscription as it should be. So this were the optional extra lighter aluminium rims. But for this bike as well, we're also looking for an extra rim in the same size, same inscription, Borani, to put in the rear. So wheels is just, that's becoming a little bit of an issue, probably with this project, as we are still searching the market for wheel parts. So if you have any of these Radaelli wheels, 18-inch, 1x8.85 is that, please contact us, or the Borani, inscripted 4623. We're definitely looking for those parts to finish this project. But we can go along with the project anyway, so we'll do that definitely. Next job, obviously, will be the whole of the wiring, the electrical system, so that's going to be placed in the near future. And then we're going towards the end of this project, hopefully with a set of correct wheels in there as well, so we can finalize the project in a later stage. So that concludes this video here at Back to Classics, part 1 of the restoration of this wonderful 250 Mach 1. We'll definitely be back with a new video in the future about the same bike when it is near completed, or maybe completed, that we can take it for a ride outside. So be sure to check and follow our channel and subscribe, so you'll get the notification when the new video is uploaded. Well, we thank you very much for watching. Toodledokie. See you next time.